My pleasure to welcome you this morning to the latest of the Foundation's public event series known as The Power of TV. Those who have been to an Academy event possibly in the past know that I just passionately believe that there is no more powerful medium than television with the ability to positively impact social and cultural change. Studies have shown that when television embraced the concept of the designated driver and populated stories in television and commercials, incidents of drunk driving across the United States diminished. More applicable to this morning, over the past 20 years, with the increasingly accurate portrayals of teen and unwanted pregnancy in television storylines, research has shown a significant drop, as much as almost half of the rates of these types of incidences of pregnancies. So it is vitally important that when television tells stories about these issues like the one we're going to talk about this morning, women's health care, that they do it right, that they do it responsibly, that they, tell it accurately. And that's why we are so thrilled to be partnering this morning on this panel with Hollywood Health and Society, an organization that is dedicated to ensuring that television can tell these stories responsibly by providing research and consulting services on just a wide range of topics, from aging and ageism to nuclear proliferation and disarmament strategies. So I want to thank Kate Folb, Director of Hollywood Health and Society, for being with us this morning and partnering with us. Kate, did you want to say a few words? Just a few.
You did such a great job.
There you go.
Thank you so much, Maury, for having us, and thank you all. Oh, man, what a great, we have to have the photographer come up here and take a picture this way because it's amazing. It's just amazing to see you all here today. And we just wanted to say thank you to the Television Academy Foundation and to the Academy for partnering with us on this exciting discussion today. And you did a great commercial for Hollywood Health and Society, so I don't even have to do that. But just to let you all know that we are here in service of the entertainment industry to help you research your storylines on health, medicine, science, etc. It's free, we don't take a credit, so don't worry about that. We're just here to support you in telling the great stories that you're able to do, and that's why you are who you are. So anyway, thank you. This is a short panel, so I don't want to talk anymore, and we'll get right to it. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. So our moderator this morning is a phenomenal young actress. Many of you will know her as the irrepressible Sam, radio host and college student who is confronting her own set of social and cultural issues on the terrific Justin Simien show, Dear White People, on Netflix. Please welcome Logan Browning.
Good morning. This is a wonderful group for a morning. Awesome. I guess I'm going to sit here. Hi, guys. So, do I need this? Yes. Okay. So I'm Logan. I'm really excited to be here. I'm excited you all are here. I've been talking with your panelists, and they are a group of amazing women who have created stories on television about women's reproductive health and access, and also someone who does that as her research. So to start our panel off, I would love to introduce our first guest, Miss Dorothy Fortenberry. She is the writer and co-producer of The Handmaid's Tale, one of my favorite shows. Here she is. Give her a round of applause. Hi, Dorothy. Hi. Our next guest is a showrunner of an amazing show on Freeform called The Bold Type, Miss Amanda Lasher. She's also known for her work on Riverdale and one of my all-time favorites, Gossip Girl, XOXO. I started watching that in college and was just obsessed. Spotted. Oh, I love it. I love it. Our third panelist is known for her work on The Resident. She co-creates a show, The Resident, with Dr. Roshan, who's also here in the front row. And she is creating a new film called Jane, which is about the women's liberation movement in Chicago, and that will be starring Elizabeth Moss, and it'll be out in 2019. Please welcome Miss Hayley Schore. Hi, Hayley. Our next panelist is known for her work on Criminal Minds and ER. She is a co-producer and writer on one of my favorite shows on TNT, Claws, with the amazing cast. I love that cast. It's such a dynamic group of women. Hi, Janine. And last but not least, we have a really, really cool qualitative research specialist from UC San Francisco, Gretchen Sisson. How do I say your last name? Is it Sisson? Sisson? French, Sisson. Gretchen's research focuses on everything from teen pregnancy, teen parenthood, reproductive health. She catalogs abortion and television from the 60s to now, and she's going to be able to give us some really great insight. So yeah, these are our panelists. Also, I know we're all in a space of, we're still opening our eyes from last night, the election. We were all scrolling on our phones. And so we'll definitely talk about some of the things that were passed or not passed that have to do with women's reproductive health last night, just to catch you up on that. But I'm going to start with Gretchen, because Gretchen, your research in women's health and access, I feel like, allows us to lay a really grounded landscape for this conversation.
So we go all the way back to some really early silent films. The first silent film to feature abortion came out in 1916. So I now have over a century of data. And so there's a lot to look at. But of course, we see the first TV portrayals coming out in the 60s. And there we can sort of see a lot of patterns that happened kind of pre-Roe in the 1960s, before abortion was legal nationwide. There are some really important examples. Soap operas actually really led the way on a lot of these. Another World, All My Children, and then you had like a lot of the legal dramas, The Defenders. Maude, of course, was a really important early one that we see. And there is this there was a shift in how we tell these stories, from whether we're telling a story about a medical or a legal drama that happens to involve a woman who's having an abortion or considering having an abortion, to stories that actually really focus on those women's stories of making a decision about their pregnancy and actually seeking out or obtaining one. So those are kind of the trends that we've been looking at most recently. Most of my work, most of the data, the specific data that I'll be talking about today, and I promise not to throw too many numbers at you after last night when we're all only thinking about 50.5 and 49.5. But most of the data that I'm talking about today is from the last 10 to 15 years. And what we're seeing a lot of very recently is a shift to include more stories of women of color. They're still dramatically underrepresented, but we're seeing more of it. We're seeing a little more diversity as far as women who are already, or characters, I should say, who are already mothers who are seeking abortions. Most women in the U.S. who have an abortion are already parenting children. And so we're seeing a shift that's going in a more accurate direction. But I think that there's still a lot of potential looking ahead to the future as far as what that procedure looks like, and particularly with the changing legal landscape.
Wonderful, thank you. So all of you are creators or show creators, writers, producers, have been able to find a way to include all of that information in your stories, which is not easy and it's not required. You know, this is in school. You're not required to hit these things, but you choose to. What are those conversations like in your writer's room when you guys make the decision to include an abortion storyline or include, Plan B storyline? What are those conversations like in your writer's rooms?
For us, it's been really gratifying, especially in the political climate that we're in, to be able to tell these stories. And I mean, it'll come out of somebody talking about their own personal experience, but honestly, right now, there is, for us, a little bit of a choice that we're making. I mean, we are doing a storyline this season where we, in the upcoming season, where we talk about abortion, and we talk about what we were talking about earlier today, I'm so sorry, you guys, I'm so tired that my brain, I was up, I could not get off my phone last night. But the fake abortion clinics.
The crisis pregnancy
centers. Yes, thank you. The crisis pregnancy centers. And so we're talking about that. And it literally came out of when we found out that Justice Kennedy was stepping down. We were just so depressed and upset, and like the room just kind of shut down, and we wanted to do something to make ourselves feel better. And so we did that episode and that storyline in response to that, to wanting to talk about that, and how do we want to do it in our way, and what do we want to shine a light on.
Yeah, I can add to that. On Claws, we try to do touch hot topics, and I really wanted to tell a story about one of our characters going through making the decision to have an abortion. And I think often you think the networks will not support it. They don't want to be political, but they were very behind us. I think they felt like we should tell this story, and we should be bold, and we should be provocative. They definitely, I don't want to say they, but I think as storytellers, we wanted to make sure that everyone's opinion was recognized. And it's very easy sort of, not only to like, when you are political and you want to write television, you want to get your politics on. And so you use it in a subversive way to kind of say, this is what's going on, this is how fucked up the world is right now. But it also, we have to sort of also see the other sides of it, even if we don't agree. And that's the hard thing, because like I am so, pro-choice that it was hard for me to go, how do I integrate other people's opinions? But I think that's the way the world is, and so we had to sort of say, how do we do it? But I think every writer's trying to say something provocative and something real. And I think if you asked our generation, was this going to be, like, was this going to go away? Was this right actually going to go away? Could we actually be looking at overturning Roe v. Wade? Like, even in doing this story, which we did a year ago, maybe in developing it, I never pictured that we would be here at this moment. So I think it's important for storytellers to push the envelope, because we're in a crisis time.
Dorothy?
Yeah, I think our situation is a little unique with Handmaid's Tale, because we're doing a story around reproductive choice, but it's framed in a particular way. So in, the dystopia of The Handmaid's Tale, like, nobody's getting an abortion. Like, no, it's a lot of things have been overturned. So
we're getting close.
We're very afraid.
Hang tight. 2021, it's coming. So I feel like the choices that we make are slightly different. We started the show in the spring of 2016. So the Democratic primary was still going on when we started the show. So, it was 100 million years ago. And we realized, we really try to think about things that are definitely we absorb what's happening in the world around us, but we also try to just play out the logical consequences of the world that Margaret Atwood created. Like, she wrote this book in 1986. She was not responding to this exact political moment, but she was responding to deep, deep currents and trends and ideas that have permeated our society for a very long time. So I think there are some shows that very much like, it's a headline, it's a story, like, which is great, which I love, can be very flexible and nimble at responding to things instantly. We all breathe in the news, we all take it in. It certainly filters through us into our story making, but because we're playing in this slightly different world, it's not as direct. We try to just really live in that world and then think through, okay, given the parameters of that world, what would that feel like? What choices would be available? What would it feel like to be pregnant without your consent? You know, what would it feel like to have to carry that pregnancy to term? What would it feel like to be forced to, you know, give the child that you carried to another family? That, you know, all of the things that come from the central premise of the show.
Hayley, did you? Well, you have your film coming up.
In, you know, the
actually, Gretchen,
dystopia of the Handmaid's Tale.
I'd like to ask you.
Nobody's getting an abortion. Like, no,
Based
you know,
on kind of
it's
the concept that
a
these
lot of
writers
things
and
have been
creators
overturned.
have been able to provide these stories to.
So
we're getting
the
close.
television
We're
media
very afraid.
space.
Okay.
You know of some stories that have aired that are a negative. They shed a negative light on these things. Can you talk about kind of how you see there's the varied portrayals of this on television?
Yeah, I need to know everybody who's in the room first before I say anything bad. So I'll talk in aggregate because I actually think that it's actually possible to be very well intentioned in telling these stories and to still misstep. And there's also a lot of things that we don't actually know the impact of. So, for example, and I think that this is actually one of the most important things looking ahead, is the portrayal of illegal abortions on TV. So about 20% of the abortions that we see on TV are illegal abortions because they're set in the past, or in a few rare cases like dystopian futures that we're moving towards. These illegal abortions are overwhelmingly portrayed as dangerous, as risky to physical and mental health, often as fatal. They're almost always coat hangers or surgical procedures. The providers are portrayed uniformly very negatively, like these back alley butchers. And I believe, often from the context of these shows, that what writers are trying to do is to say it's really important that abortion is legal because this is what it looks like historically. But what if it's going to be illegal again very soon? What are the stories that we can tell around that then? Because it's not going to look like coat hangers. It is going to look like pills that you buy on the internet, and decades of research and the experiences of millions of women tell us that often you can safely manage your own abortion. And right now I think we have, and this isn't just something that a narrative that television has fostered, but something that we have seen in the abortion rights movement,
of the
stress
Tale, like,
on the dangerousness of
like,
illegal
no, you know,
abortion. I think we need to start
a lot of
what
things
that
have been
looks
overturned.
like. And I think that that's one of the biggest gaps that we're seeing now.
We're getting close.
One of the biggest omissions in a narrative that is increasingly becoming problematic now that Roe is going to be overturned.
And Hayley, the film that you are working on called Jane touches on some of the issues of the women in Chicago who went about doing abortions themselves and learning how to do it. Could you tell us just a little bit about the film and about how, if you had any complications getting that film off the ground?
Yeah, well, we've been on a really long journey with Call Jane, and it is based on a group of women in the late 60s, both housewives and college students who were watching the pre-Roe v. Wade that you just described, back alley abortions and self-induced abortions, and they were watching women die. And so they formed this collective, and ultimately they started out as a referral service, and when the doctors they were referring to were too exorbitantly priced for anybody but wealthy people to get abortions, they started doing them themselves, and they performed close to 12,000 safe abortions pre-Roe v. Wade, and then they got arrested, and then Roe v. Wade passed, and they were freed. But yeah, the difficulty, we started this project, developing this project with Simon Curtis, and all his reps told him not to do it. Our reps told us not to do it. So, you know, people still feel like it's a really delicate subject matter in Hollywood, you know, to approach. So yeah, we've had actresses who are actually out, you know, talking about women's rights whenever, and then when we go to them, they're like, I don't want to do an issue movie. So, you know, it's really interesting. There's a lot of contradictions.
Yeah, I say that.
Roshan has more to say about it.
Well, speaking of privilege, Amanda on the bold type, Jane gets Plan B delivered to her doorstep with Postmates.
White privilege. Yeah.
But it's also it also just it talks about where we are in time, the fact that is what her access is in this cosmopolitan city. Can you talk about why you chose to share that story, and maybe some of the contrast to that, the fact that not every woman has, you know, can Postmates Plan B?
Yeah, I know, sadly. Well, for me, I'm very interested in normalizing something like Plan B and taking away the shame and any stigma about it. I think that is one of the things that we're able to do on the show that's really wonderful, and we are encouraged to do it by the studio and the network, which is really, really nice. And then in terms of the lack of access, that isn't a story that we have done so far about, you know, because we focus so much on New York, but I think it's something that we should be talking about, and it's a huge opportunity. Because people are going to be needing to find other ways to do it. But for me, normalizing it is part of reaching those other communities, because I know I do have family in Indiana, and when I go there, it is different, and they don't see it the same way. And there is, you know, people are whispering about it. They're not having open conversations about it. So the more I feel that we normalize it, I mean, totally different subject, but I'm involved with Moms Demand Action, and I have 2 little kids, and now when I set up a play date, I'm like, we don't have guns in the house. Just letting you know, we have a dog, he's friendly, we don't have guns in the house, and my kid has a peanut allergy. And then I try and ask the other parents about it. I just want to normalize it, and so that's something that we try and do on the show and around Plan B.
Can I talk about the bold type episode with Plan B?
I'd love for you to.
Because I love the bold type episode with Plan B. I'm not officially here to talk about that, but I want to. Because one of my enormous pet peeves about TV is how little emergency contraception is portrayed, and how my big pet peeve with this is the movie Blue Valentine, where Michelle Williams is a literal nurse. She's a nurse, and she has one night of unprotected sex, and she's like, I guess I have to have a kid now. And you're like, Michelle Williams, you are a literal nurse. You know what? Did they not get there in your textbook? Go to a drugstore. So it makes me super angry. And I feel like the sort of idea of one night of, you know, unprotected sex or sex with a condom breaks or whatever, you have to have a child is such a common narrative trope. And I feel like it really isn't how people live their lives, and I feel like just watching somebody get emergency contraception is awesome, and I'm so glad that you had that episode. So I like your show very much. Thank you for that.
Dorothy and Janine, both, everyone, in your writers' rooms, how important is diversity of gender, diversity of race, diversity of religion when you're talking about these topics? Because I know you have a very religiously diverse room in The Handmaid's Tale, and Janine, I read that you specifically in the episode of Claws, when the women are in the Brady Brunch brackets, there were no men in those brackets because you felt they didn't need to speak on the fact that this is a women's our bodies, our rights. Can you speak on that?
Yeah. So, to the first part of the question, I think diversity is important. I like to call it inclusion, just including everyone's voice. I don't think if you have one type of person in a room, I think you have a very weak room. So I think it's how do you include people, stop segregating and integrating. And so that is the answer to that question, because if you have a real reflection of the world, you'll tell better stories. As it relates to, you know, the diversity of thought, it's important because not everyone, sometimes you think someone sitting across from you thinks like you, and they don't. Some people were brought up in households that are very religious. Some people hold on to that. Some people are afraid to say what their opinion is. The Brady Bunch episode, and a lot of people have talked about it, I did an episode where a character, Virginia, who happens to be, she's biracial, African-American and Vietnamese, she decides that she doesn't want to have her child. And she's a manicurist, and she tells, a few friends about it, and one friend goes with her to get the abortion. And she goes through all of the sort of, what if it's Obama? You know what I mean? What if I'm having Martin Luther King? And her friends are like, you're not, don't worry about it. You know what I mean? They make her feel better. But in the midst of it, she asked, what were people saying at the nail salon about me? And then we cut to Brady Bunch squares, and you see everyone's sort of opinion. And some people think it's I had 3 abortions, so it doesn't matter, she'll get over it. Another person thinks she's going to hell. Someone else is praying for her. Someone else, one of our main characters said, she wanted an abortion when she was younger, but her parents wouldn't let her. So she didn't have access to it, and so she had to have the baby, and then her parents gave the baby away, and that has haunted her. So all of the opinions, I think there was 8 opinions, all of the opinions were diverse, but they came from people telling stories in the room. They came from people saying, my sister had an abortion and this is what she thinks. My mom had one, this is, etc. But I think if you don't have, I'm always in awe of people who don't have inclusive staffs, because I'm how do you see the world? You have an Obama bumper sticker, but you're a segregationist. So I'm a little kind of, I'm always flummoxed by that. So I think we've got to get people to include people, because if you don't have inclusion, you just are not reflecting how it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything that you said. Also, our room, we definitely have diversity across race and ethnicity, and it's a mostly female room. But we also, the religion thing, it's Handmaid's Tale takes place in a theocratic regime, so religion plays a huge part in the storytelling of that world. Margaret Atwood in particular is agnostic, so the book has sort of a particular religious flavor that comes from her, but our staff has a really wide range of people, from people who, were brought up atheist and are still atheist, from people who are Jewish, people who were raised Catholic and never go to church, people who are evangelical and still go to church, people who are raised Catholic and still are Catholic. We got everything, and I think that it really helps us tell stories about faith because we're coming to it from a place, from all kinds of places, and not just one perspective. And so we can really look at those issues and how faith informs people's relationship to reproductive choice, to their bodies, to women, and that's complicated, that it's not a easy answer. So that's something in our room that really, I think, helps make our show good. I think it's because we don't all agree and we're not all the same, and it's not a cookie cutter of one thing. I'm personally on Team Goes to Church every week, and that's a part of me that I bring to that room way more than I have to any other job before, because it's a show about religion. Usually it's that's my private life and this is my job, and I'm no, okay, we're gonna talk about it. So it really, it's just different for everybody, and I think it helps make our show good.
I think so too. So Gretchen, last night we saw 3 different measures in 3 different states that went 2 different ways. In West Virginia and Alabama and Oregon, could you talk about what happened last night via the election, and also how politics plays a role in storytelling, or how storytelling and vice versa?
Yes, I can. So what happened? So basically, there are 3 states with different measures, different ballot initiatives around abortion, and Oregon's. I can't remember which side was yes or which side was no, but Oregon had a very progressive night last night. They reelected their amazing governor, Kate Brown, and their ballot affirmed no was good. It failed. There we go. And so in Alabama and West Virginia, though, we saw 2 very worrisome ballots pass for as far as abortion access. Alabama passed a constitutional amendment affirming fetal personhood and basically giving a woman equal rights with a fetus, or really an embryo that she's carrying because it starts at conception. This will impact not only abortion access in Alabama, but miscarriage management and IVF. And so that's what's happening in Alabama. Fetal personhood has been on ballot initiatives before in Mississippi and Colorado, and it failed both times. This is the first time that it's passed, and maybe it's unconstitutional, but we'll have to see what Justice Kavanaugh has to say about that. In West Virginia, it wasn't fetal personhood, but they passed an outright abortion ban and removed the right to public funding for abortion. So Medicaid can no longer pay for abortions for poor women in West Virginia, which is actually, I was actually surprised to find out that Alabama had that in the first place to get rid of. Most states don't. And so that's what's going on in both of those states. So if we want to imagine what a post-Roe America is going to look like, just like go to Alabama right now. Or a lot of other places in the country. There are 7 states where we only have 1 clinic, and access is really tenuous for most women in those states. We've also seen, we're seeing an increasing uptick in women that are being prosecuted for ending their own pregnancies or attempting to end their own pregnancies in a couple different states. So there's the case of Purvi Patel in Indiana. She spent 3 years in jail for trying to induce a miscarriage for a pregnancy she didn't want to carry to term. Jennifer Whalen's case in Pennsylvania was a mother who was trying to help her 16-year-old daughter get access to an abortion. The closest clinic was 75 miles away. So while she was Googling to find what she could do, she found pills. She bought them online. She gave them to her daughter. Her daughter was having a lot of cramping. Her mom was concerned. She took her to the ER. The ER looked at her daughter and said, she's fine. This is what a miscarriage is, unfortunately, and sent her home. No medical intervention. The mother was arrested for providing the pills to her daughter and distributing medication without a license, and is currently being prosecuted. So we've seen an uptick in these arrests. Today there are 21 arrests like these cases in a lot of different states. So we're kind of already there in this dystopian future for a lot of women, especially poor women, especially women of color who have little access. And there's a lot of stories that can be told around this, and we don't need to go to great imaginative leaps to think about what this is going to look like.
Thank you. Don't mean to get super political. I just didn't know if you guys knew about that stuff. And I think it's just important to know about what's happening in our state constitutions, just because you can then relate it to what you're seeing on TV and whether or not you're seeing those stories represented accurately. How do you guys feel like those political conversations have influenced your writers' rooms? Do you prefer to not really talk about them, or do you face them head on? Because I know these are very, they can be controversial, like anything, like religion. Do they come up a lot in your writers' rooms?
Yeah, I mean, I think writers are looking at the world, and I mean, right now you have a lot of depressed writers' rooms because people don't know how to react to right now. But I think people do bring in their politics and their opinions because that's what makes them unique. And I think today, in writers' rooms, people will be talking about what happened yesterday. And regardless of what you may think or don't think or what you're happy about or sad about, it will come up because it's hard to separate it.
Yeah, and I think also, like, in a writer's room, we have the ability to tell both dystopia versions and utopia versions, and I think they're both really important. And I feel like there's a conversation in the writer's room, in our writer's room, of like, what's the worst, okay, so take it to 11. Everything that you were just saying, Gretchen, like, what's the logical extension? So we spend a lot of time talking about what's happening now, but then also sort of extrapolating out. But I also think there's a real value to telling stories about what's the best it could go. Because I feel like if we only tell the what's the worst it could go, then we can get kind of comfortable in that place, and it's kind of like, like poking a cold sore with your tongue, and it's like, it's painful. And it's like you can sort of like sit in the dystopia and just like kind of enjoy the pain and not sort of imagine something better. So I feel like, there are a lot of different ways the writer's room can respond, and one of them is to do the worst possible version, but there's the other, which is like, what if women could get healthcare that they needed? What if, women could get childcare that they needed? What if we had that world? What would it look like? What would women do all day if their reproductive choices weren't the foundation of so many of their other decisions? Like, that'd be cool to spend some time in. So I guess I'm saying, like, I think every writer's room is different, but I think it's they don't always have to be tragic stories. Like, we can tell hopeful stories too, because that provides a path to our brains to open up a space where we might live a different kind of life.
Yeah, I agree. Politics, we talk about it a lot, and I think one of the things that I just want to touch upon is, there's this cliche about millennials and not being engaged, and we do a show about 3 millennial women, and we've just found it to be so the opposite, and it's really exciting, actually. I find writing about millennial women and looking at the world through their eyes, because I do think they're really engaged, and I think that, like, it has made me more woke and has made me more aware, and it's inspiring and exciting, and that is something that I love plugging into, and that it makes me feel hopeful about the future, and so, yay millennials.
I actually think that there is still a significant difference between cable and network TV in the conversations you can have in a writer's room. And I don't know what network TV's plan is to get competitive with cable, but I don't think those conversations, so I was thinking about on Code Black, there was a storyline about a woman who was pregnant and had cancer and couldn't get chemotherapy because of her pregnancy, and abortion was never an option on CBS. So
no abortion on CBS.
Yeah, no abortions on CBS.
Thank you. Let's move, guys.
That was hilarious.
Yeah, I know on The Resident, Roshan and I actually, after creating the show, which on the diversity thing, it was 2 women and 1 person of color who created that show. So that I thought was a good start. But even on that show, pushing the diversity conversation has been tough because we created it with a Indian lead, and it sort of became a white lead. So, yeah. So I think network is a little different than cable, is all I'm saying.
And streaming, which is its whole other world. Wow, Gretchen, you had something you wanted to say.
I was just going to riff off of what Dorothy said about envisioning better futures also. And it's funny, my colleague Renee, who's here, she and I wrote a piece last January for the anniversary of Roe v. Wade that was basically like all the stories about like futuristic abortions are really grim. And, by the way, some organizations are like using drones to drop abortion pills in Northern Ireland. And a lot has changed since last January. Namely, abortion is legal in Northern Ireland, so they're not doing that anymore, and it might not be here. So I think, but I just wanted to second that point that I think that it is important to envision different ways of access. And what would OTC access look like? What else can we do with drones? I don't know. And we see a lot of these futuristic portrayals that are making the same mistakes as as shows that are set in a contemporary world, and the abortions are always the same. We don't have an idea of. I'll use one specific example, but it's a show where it's a sci-fi show, and they envision this pregnancy test where the woman basically stands in front of her bathroom mirror at home, and she licks a piece of paper and she puts it on her mirror, and it gives her like her full ultrasound and her exact gestational date, and she can hear this is elaborate, kind of cool way of thinking about a pregnancy test. And then when she's thinking about her abortion, she's like, well, I guess I have to make an appointment at the clinic. Right. I mean, it's just it's that same sort of thing where shows that are really imaginative and futuristic in different ways, like abortion's still boring and kind of hard to get. And so while I also think it's really important to reflect our current realities and our future realities, which I don't feel particularly hopeful about right now, I also think that the only way we're going to get through that is to think about what we do want this to look like.
Yeah, like somebody make feminist Star Trek. Like someone in this room just like envision what that spaceship is and like where it's going and all the awesome shit they're doing.
There's a room downstairs. We can all meet afterwards.
It's gonna just, I feel like, yeah, they're just like flying through outer space and giving like super chill reproductive care to like all the women in the galaxy. And it's great.
Battlestar Galactica like kind of had that a little bit, where they had like refugees coming onto Galactica to get abortions, but then they nipped that in the bud.
Well, speaking of a future where there is more positive storytelling, Amanda, do you want to talk about what the future of the Bold Type holds in terms of reproductive discussions and what you guys plan to do?
Yeah, we just wrapped production on season 3 last week. Yay! And this season we are like I said, tackling the oh my god, why can't I remember the clinics, the fake clinics.
CPC.
Thank you. CPC, like the drug, like okay, not CBD oil. No, got it. Totally different. Different panel. But we should have put them together. So we're talking about that because that was something that I wanted to, again, like I said, shine a light on. We are continuing Jane's journey on her egg freezing, which is also something that I wanted to normalize and, talk about, sort of walk through the process of that. And that was a very cool thing because we had a couple of people in the writer's room who had done that, and executives who worked on the show. Everybody was really open about it, and it was really just a pleasure to demystify that process and just talk about women taking control of their reproductive health in a way that was different. And I'm trying to think, we're doing a few other things, but I am blanking on it right now. Yeah, but I don't know. I'll remember as soon as
you can keep us in suspense.
Yeah, keep us in suspense. It's going to be great.
Well, I really would love to give you all an opportunity to ask any questions if you have any. And while you're deciding if you, it's Margaret and Roni from Control Delete in the audience as well. It's really nice to have you guys. And while we get microphones passed along, I'll also say feel free to check out Dear White People episode. I think it's 4. It also is about abortion, and I think it's a great episode. I think our writers and our showrunner did a fantastic job doing a sliding door episode that shows a woman, a young woman of color from a lower income family, showing her two choices, and that this is what her life could be like if she had the child, and this is what her life could be like if she had the abortion. Didn't make one greater than the other. It just showed that this woman had options, and it showed the story. And I feel like there's so many young women who are in college right now facing that. And wow, to have a character on TV and to see that you have a choice one way or the other, and knowing about your options is fantastic. So my writers aren't here, but I just applaud them. And if you would like more shows to watch on this topic, Dear White People has an episode.
It's so.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Okay. So my name is Roni, and Margaret and I are the co-creators of Control Delete, which is an Emmy-nominated web series that's a comedy about abortion. Like, just about abortion. It's a workplace comedy in a clinic. So what I wanted to actually ask all of you, since we're in the throes of finishing season 2, and we write it together, so it's a very female-directed point of view about reproductive justice. In your rooms, I assume there are men. How do you feel about telling reproductive justice stories with men and women in the room, or do you think that it's just for women, by women? Like, how are we feeling about how we tell stories about abortion when it's really like my body, my choice?
Gender diversification in the writer's room.
Or gender inclusion in the writer's room.
Funny, I think a lot of times the stories do come from women because they're thinking about it. And so, but a lot of times then men have something to say on it because not that they've experienced, but someone in their life has gone through something that they think is important.
Always have something to say.
Yeah. But I think I think women congratulations that you're actually doing this, because that's bold and fresh. But I think, women need to keep telling the stories, but as long as we keep engaging our allies and men too to do it as well, because if they eventually are in a room and a woman pitches a story, you want that woman to also get supported if they're running that show. So I think it's important that everyone weigh in.
Yeah, I mean, to speak to that, at our writer's room, we have men in our writer's room, and I mean, we tell so many female-based stories, and they've been well-trained at this point. But I think that engaging them as allies is really important. Just like as white women, we have a responsibility to step up and get our shit together and educate ourselves. And I think that men do too, about women's issues. And so I think that the men on our show have really taken that on and embraced that, and it's been really nice because I came up in very male writers' rooms, like where I was like, there are many rooms where I was the only woman, and so it's been a nice shift, and so I think it's a cool opportunity to engage men in the conversation.
We have we have a male showrunner, male co-EPs, and then another man on staff. They're amazing listeners. You have to get that from a showrunner. A showrunner makes a room feel the way the room feels. And I think I am lucky because I feel like I'm seeing a male showrunner capable of setting a room that feels very safe for women.
So wonderful. We have another audience question. Hi.
Hi. One of the first episodes I ever wrote in my early 20s was a Degrassi episode, two-part abortion episode that aired in Canada, was banned on the end, and there was a New York Times article written about it. And 13 years later, I mean, these are still stories I'm really passionate about telling, and I've had, to your point about Jane, a lot of problems getting like streamers and cable and networks to even want to like look at the pitches, let alone, tell the story. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on how we encourage cable and specifically broadcast and streamers to buy these stories and buy these worlds and tell these stories. And I applaud you all for kind of like, building it into your existing world, but to actually have these worlds, and have people want to buy them.
Yeah, I don't know with with advertising dollars how it can work. I mean, I think with a subscription-based streaming, I wouldn't see why it would really be an issue. But yeah, I think network is so tethered to their advertisers that it's really tough.
Do you ever?
I don't have a utopian answer for that.
I have limited expertise on this, but I will just say that one thing that I have noticed, because we track all types of abortion stories, so where a character considers getting an abortion and doesn't, or where they actually get one, or and what I've noticed a little bit of an uptick in the past few years is characters disclosing a past abortion without having like a whole big story arc about making a pregnancy decision, and I think that those disclosures are really important because people are already invested in a character. They already care about them. It doesn't take a lot of like storytelling investment to kind of drop that in the context of something else going on. And it's kind of a powerful but smaller way to incorporate that into a story. I can't speak to what pushback you'll get at what point, obviously, because that's not what I do. But I do think that there are ways of including this that kind of meets your characters where you are, and I would assume might be easier to incorporate.
Yeah, I was going to add to that. We had a character on season 1 of Claws, and it's Jennifer, and she made a joke that I think she either did a car wash so she could get money for her abortion when she was in high school. I mean, it's like she literally said it, and she said it as she was sort of like walking to do somebody's nails.
And she had enough for 2.
Yeah, she did, and she had enough for 2, exactly.
2 for 1.
And we did it, and nobody commented, you know. I also think, like, I also came from network TV before this. When I was on ER, you know, I think it depends on who is at the top. I mean, I think ER was such a huge, mega hit that John Wells like pushed us to tell these bold stories, and we could tell, you know, reproductive rights stories. But it is it's hard because you have to, on a network show, spend political capital to actually get it done, and then you still might not get it done because they might just say no.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an outlier because I'm at a network that's like they want us to tell these stories. They're, you know, Freeform's been incredibly encouraging, and so is our studio, and so I'm unique in that. But I do think that there are places that want to tell stories like that and are looking for that kind of content. And I think it's a question of like there is some value in researching those places and trying to seek those out because we are in such a niche market world right now. There are places that are more open to it and looking to tell those stories.
We have another question. Hi.
Hi, I'm Monique. Thank you for being here. My question to you is along the lines of diversity. I like what you were saying earlier. I actually moderate a celibate and some asexual groups, and I feel that many of my members have been marginalized in their beliefs because many times when people think celibate, oh, you must be super religious, or asexual, maybe something happened to you, there's something wrong. Then we have our sex repulsed people. And there's all different reasons why someone would be celibate, or, you know, asexuality is very real. And from what I see in the media, many times it's kind of a joke, or there's a misunderstanding. And I'd like to know, do you see any room for this, you know, a gap opening up for these types of people that really haven't been represented in the society?
I think that's such a good question. I mean, because you're really right. Like, there's been so much attention on every iteration of sexuality, but that one. And I think that would be a fascinating episode.
Yeah, I think you actually bringing it up now kind of will get people thinking. So I think the more you talk about it, I think that has to be said on television. And I think a lot of times people aren't, until this moment, I didn't know there were groups that were celibacy, or, you know, I didn't know until you said it. And now I'm going, oh my gosh, I want to go research this. Yeah. So keep talking about it.
All of our writer brains just went.
Yeah, we were like.
There's a really good arc on BoJack Horseman featuring an asexual character and his dating life. If anybody wants to check out a positive, I mean, it's a goofy show, but yeah, it's a great show, and I think it handles having a character who's asexual really successfully, and it's like you think he's just like a hapless guy who can't get a date, and then he comes to understand that that's a big part of him, and joins a community and finds an identity. And anyway, so just I will say that's one really positive portrayal I've seen, but there certainly could be others.
And I do know that Secret Life of the American Teenager had a a character who was celibate, and I don't know about that portrayal. She was a very religious character. Yeah, so that's the only one I can think of. So I'm doing the same thing you guys. It's racking my brain. Yeah. It was a great question. Thank you. Of course, yes. Sorry. We had. Hey, you know what? I was just like waving to you, making sure you was. How was your breakfast? Was it good? Hey, thank you so much for being here, male allies. We love you. Hi.
Hi, I'm Sherry Bonner. I'm with Planned Parenthood, so I'm really thrilled to be all together and having this conversation. And something that's important to me is that we are normalizing abortion. 1 in 4 women has an abortion in her lifetime. We spend 2 to 3 years trying to get pregnant or being pregnant, and 30 years trying not to get pregnant. So there's a lot of stories in there. But I also think about medication abortion, which is the mifepristone, and now it's effective up to 10 weeks, and that's when the majority of abortions take place. And so that's something at home. And so this whole stigma about going into a health center, which we need to destigmatize, but there's also a story about a woman being with her family and their loved ones at home. So I'm wondering if anyone has thought about that, or...
I have thought about that. So about 40% of abortions in the U.S. are medication abortions, but only about 10% of abortions on TV are medication abortions. Actually, one of my favorite abortion portrayals is a medication abortion. It's from the Australian show Please Like Me. I don't know if any of you have had the chance to see it. It's hilarious. And they go to the clinic, they get the pills, they go home. It's a woman named Claire and her best friend Josh, and they go through the whole thing. She holds the pills under her tongue. He makes fun of her because she can't talk. She goes in the bathroom, and they show her in the bathroom. And it's not graphic, as she's like passing the pregnancy. She's having cramps. She's saying she's never going to have sex again. He's pacing outside the bathroom. She makes a joke about taking a picture and showing it to her friends when they show her pictures of their kids. And it's like it has like the right moments of like kind of being heartfelt and kind of being bittersweet, and it's really about like her friendship with Josh and how he's supporting her. It's totally medically accurate, and it's great, and it doesn't involve the like dramatic cutaway in the waiting room. So I think that we definitely haven't seen very many portrayals of medication abortion, and it's a huge part of abortion care right now. It's going to be more and more where we're going, I think, as I've mentioned. So I think that showing that done safely and well, and occasionally with comedy, would be a step forward.
Thank you so much. So I hate to do this. I'm so sorry, you guys, that oh my gosh, we are out of time, but I'm sure if our panelists have the time, then they would love to speak to you after the panel. If not, then find them on Twitter. But I just want to say thank you thank you to our amazing panelists. Thank you to Gretchen and Janine and Hayley and Amanda and Dorothy. Watch their shows, The Handmaid's Tale, The Bold Type, Call Jane when it comes out, probably in a year, and Claws. Thank you guys so much for being here.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. And thank me. Yes.